Well, good evening and welcome. Apologies for the slight delay, a few minutes delay in the start there. Some technical difficulties getting all set back up. I've just been on the road. All of my gear has been thrown around in the boot of the car, and I thought that my microphone had stopped working. And so I wrestled with it for a while. I tried different plugs, I checked different things, and then discovered, and this will blow your mind, I discovered that if you have it on mute, it doesn't work. Yeah. That was the problem. So fix that, and here we are. So apologies for that. Look, the comments have been absolutely pouring in already. YouTubers are able to start commenting before the stream even starts, and there's just been a heap of conversation going. So guys, thank you so much for that, and I'll respond to a few of the comments that have been made as I go along. But yeah, just some great interaction there, and good to see everybody raring to go. Good evening. It's going to be another one of those podcasts I can see already where I'm just not going to be able to keep up with all of the comments. So I do apologize in advance. Yes, that pesky mute button. Okay, so guys, there's going to be an appearance from my marbles tonight. I know we're all very excited to see the marbles again, but I'm going to talk about the way that the AEC. The AEC, oh gosh, election brain. It's like baby brain, but for men. The way that the AEC counted the votes in the lower house threw a lot of people into a spin. I didn't cover the details of that in my marbles video because I thought it was going to be fairly self-evident why they were doing what they were doing. That's not the case, clearly. So let me go through it with you because there isn't actually a conspiracy here. What they did actually makes a lot of sense, and it would be silly for them to do it any other way once you understand why they do it the way that they do it. So we're going to get to that. Then I'm going to talk about the Senate, and particularly the Senate in Tasmania, and I'm going to go through that with you in excruciating detail. I promise you, you will be bored to tears by the time I'm done. And what we're going to do with that is just go through and talk about how the preferences are flowing and how they're shaping up, how that whole race is shaping up, because it's actually interesting. I would have said on Tuesday when the numbers first started rolling in that I was probably a less than 1 in 10 chance of getting that last Senate spot. I would say now that my chances have improved to maybe 1 in 5. So still a minority, still more than likely not going to get it. But as time passes, my odds are actually getting better. And the interesting thing is that as time continues to pass, as I extrapolate what's happening out across the remaining 45 or so thousand votes in Tasmania that have yet to be counted, there's actually a chance that Erica Betts is actually going to come into play as well. So at the moment, it's a race. On paper, it's a race between Jackie Lambie and maybe someone like Steve Mav from One Nation. On paper, if you just look at the first preferences, you might think that that's probably how it's going to shape up. Unfortunately for Steve, lovely guy, I've met him a couple of times now. With the way the preferences are going to flow, he's not in the race at all. Really, it's actually between between the UAP candidate, Diana Adams, and myself for the Freedom Friendly Minor parties. And I'll explain why that is. Diana Adams would have to have a pretty big stroke of luck to be kept in the running. It's more likely that she will be knocked out very early, more likely than me being knocked out very early, which leaves me in the position where I'm the one that picks up everyone else's preferences and just kind of gets boosted along the way. It's ironic that the person who was doing the most to try and educate people about preferences is now also the one who potentially, I'm not saying it will happen, but there is a pathway to victory there that involves me picking up all of these preferences along the way in exactly the way that I described in the Marbles videos. So not saying it'll happen. It's definitely worth watching, and I would actually say that the likelihood of it happening is actually improving over time, and I actually think it's going to continue to improve as things get counted. I'm going to go into excruciating detail over that later. So if you need someone to put you to sleep, this will do that for you a little bit later on tonight. But first, of course, you didn't come here to see me. You came here to see what I'm going to be smoking this week. And I haven't done this for a little while, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people watching that haven't watched before. Spare me the complaints about the cigars. If you don't want to see someone smoke a cigar, then go do something else for the evening. I'm going to be enjoying a Leaf by Oscar. This is the Corojo, and this has got to be up there among one of the actual best cigars I've ever had. Blew my mind the first time I had it. It looks a bit weird because it's actually wrapped in another tobacco leaf. So this label here that I'm just peeling off is actually made entirely out of tobacco stem, this whole thing here. And the whole cigar is wrapped in a tobacco leaf that does come off, and underneath reveals a much more normal looking cigar. And this thing here is, yeah, this is a magnificent cigar. I absolutely loved the first one of these, and I had blew my mind. I've had a few since. It's been just as good every single time. This is what's called a Lancero. So based on the same word for lance, long and thin, basically. And this gives a very distinctive sort of flavor profile. It means that the wrapper has a more dominant influence on the flavors as opposed to the fill. I quite like it. I like it in the Oliva series, Oliva V, Oliva Milanios, etc. And I quite like it in this Leaf by Oscar series as well. So if you really want to nerd out about cigars, I'm happy to do that some other time. But for tonight, that's it on the cigar. I am just going to smoke it and enjoy it. Have a little bit of whiskey along with it. I'm still deciding between my Glenlivet and my Balvenie. I'll probably start with the Glenlivet and see how that matches. And if you want to complain, then I'm just going to assume that that's jealousy. You're jealous about my whiskey and my cigars. Okay, let's get started. First and foremost, the lower house and all of the conspiracy theories around the way that it was counted. Now, I know that Joel Jamal's been doing some really good work on this. Turning Point Australia, TP Oz, or Joel Jamal. If you don't follow him, do yourself a favor, look him up. He's done some really good work in the last week, helping to myth bust some of what's been claimed around the lower house and the way it's been counted. Now, I'm not saying that there have been no issues, but I want to deal very specifically with the biggest issue that people were raising that I think is completely bogus. So, I said in my marbles video that based on the polls that had been happening, I've got, by the way, black tea, always. A wonderful accompaniment to cigars. Basic Coles black tea, 4 cents a tea bag. Fantastic. Based on the polls at the time in Victoria that were showing that as many as 30% of people were not going to vote for Labor, Liberal, Greens, or Nationals. Right? You remember that. That was the premise. And I showed how a 30% vote for freedom-friendly minor parties could end up putting the freedom-friendly minor parties into second position when there were 3 left. And I used the expression, this is where the magic happens, because that was the crucial moment. That was the crucial thing, was to get into second place when there are 3 left. And I can explain to you exactly why that never happened anywhere in Australia in this election in reality. It's not that the preferential counting didn't work. And it's not because the AEC didn't follow the rules and didn't count it properly. I'll explain why they shouldn't have counted it in full and why it actually makes sense for them to do it the way they did it using my marbles. First a box. Now, what I have for you today are just 100 marbles. Each marble represents 1%. There's 100 marbles distributed between these cups. So what I'm doing here basically is saying this here, let's say Labor Party, after they've gotten the Greens preferences, right? They're sitting here on 40 odd percent, 40, 45% maybe. These guys are sitting here on 30, 35%, whatever that works out to be. Here are 2 freedom-friendly minor parties. And you remember in my marbles video, what happened was the freedom-friendly minor party in 4th got knocked out. The preferences went to the next one, and this was the magic. That was enough to put them here. That's the crucial bit. The problem is that in reality, when people actually walked into the polling booth, as opposed to just responding to phone polls, etc., this was not enough. And they ended up there. And so the freedom-friendly parties ended up being eliminated. Their preferences ended up going to the other parties, and somebody else won. Now, that's fairly obvious, right? Everyone kind of has figured that out by now. But what isn't so obvious is why the UAP again, why the AEC didn't do a full preferential count and whether that would have made a difference. There are two very simple tests that you can do to determine whether a full preferential count is worth the trouble or whether you can actually do what's called a two-party preferred or a two-candidate preferred system. The two-candidate preferred system basically says, I'll just redistribute a few votes here. What it says is, in circumstances where it is inevitable that one of these two is going to win, we're not going to count the full preferences. We're not going to eliminate one and distribute their preferences carefully one by one and then eliminate another and distribute their preferences one by one. It's pointless. All we're going to, because we know that everyone's vote is going to end up in one of these two. And I'll talk about how they know that in just a second. So what it is it's a shortcut that saves them having to do all 10, 12, 100 if it's the Senate preferences, although in the Senate they do the full count. So in the lower house, 10, 12, whatever it is, different people competing for the seat. Instead of doing them all one at a time, they can just cut to the chase and say, right, everyone else's vote is going to end up in one of these two, so why don't we just get it there? And all we're going to do is look at their ballot paper and see who they've preferenced higher. Now, how do they know that they can do that? And mathematically, isn't there a risk that maybe all of these preferences would have gathered and maybe one of these other parties would have gotten up? Well, there's two very simple tests that you can run. The first one is this. If the leading party already has a majority, then there's no point. If they've already got an absolute majority of all the votes cast, they've already got their 50% plus one, well, there's no point. They've already won. So at that point, you can just cut to the chase, declare a winner. That's nice and easy. So the other way you can tell very quickly and easily whether or not you need to do a full preferential count or whether you can just cut to the chase and go straight to a two-candidate preferred is this. If the second place has more votes than the combined total of everyone below them. Think about this. In order for this magic moment to happen, in order for the preferences to flow into this one and to put them up into second place out of the final three, the total number of votes accumulating here have to exceed the total number of votes here. And if you look at it on paper, and there's 40% of votes here, there's 35% of votes here, well, I'm sorry, but you've only got 25 left, right? You don't have enough percentage left. Even if it all gathers into a single party, it's not going to be enough to overtake second place. And so again, the numbers tell you can just take a shortcut. Why do every single party's preferences individually one at a time when you already mathematically know that they are definitely going to end up with these last two? It mathematically cannot work out any other way. So there we have the two really clear-cut cases where they should just cut the corner, just go straight to two-candidate preferred. It makes no sense and it makes no difference if they were to do a full count. However, things get a bit more controversial because we know that all of the preferences are not going to gather into a single party. So, for example, if you've got someone like the Greens as a third party, and then further down the ballot, you've got Animal Justice Party and you've got Climate Change Party and you've got the Communist Party, etc., then those preferences are going to bounce their way along and end up in the Greens. But then you've also got someone like the Liberal Democratic Party, right? And the preferences are going to bounce along and from UAP, from One Nation, from AFP, IMOP, etc., and end up in the Liberal Democratic Party. And then they're not going to go to each other. This moment where one pours into the other, it's not going to happen because the Liberal Democratic Party voters are not preferencing the Greens and vice versa. So therefore, what we actually have is a situation where one of these two, without the help of the other, would actually have to exceed the vote of the second place in order for that swap to happen, right? It's getting a little bit complicated. But what this actually means is that you could have a situation, for example, where there's only, just going to make a few adjustments here. You could have a situation where there's only 30% here, 30% here, 20% here, and 20% here, right? That makes 100% in total. 30 and 30, well, that means there's 40 left. Well, in theory, 40 would be enough if it was all combined to then leapfrog, right? But the fact is it's not going to combine. It's going to go straight from here to here and here. And therefore, they can look at the actual the way, not just the outright numbers, but if they also look at where those numbers are, they are then able to actually make an accurate prediction to say, even though mathematically, theoretically, it's possible for one of these lower parties to come over the top of one of these higher parties, in practice, it's not going to happen. And that's why even in those sorts of situations, they are able to call it and say, hey, we're just going to do two candidate preferred. Now, understand this. This is a crucial point that everyone needs to understand. The full vote, the full preferential count does take place in every single seat. They use it to inform the mathematical modeling going forward. So they want to have really good mathematical models to make sure that when they make the decisions around, are we going to do two candidate preferred or are we going to wait for a full count? They want to have good information about that. So they do the full count every single election. And they do not want that full count to arrive at a different result to the fast count they did on election night. That would lead to massive egg on their face. So the AEC actually do a pretty good job of making sure that they revert to the two candidate preferred count where it makes sense, where there is no real chance of it affecting the outcome. And where it is too close to call, they actually take Hunter from 2019 election. They took about 3 weeks to declare Hunter. They didn't declare it on the night because they could see on the night that, hey, this is not going to be callable. It's too close to call. We don't know which way it's going to go. One Nation nearly, they were in the running until the very end to claim Hunter in 2019. And the AEC did a good job of identifying that as a seat that they could not call on the basis of the two candidate preferred. Because the last thing they want to do is call a seat and then in the full count find that the preferences actually led to a different outcome. That would be humiliating for them. And they don't want to take that risk. So the simple reality is there are many examples of circumstances where it makes perfect sense to do a two candidate preferred count without going through all of the preferences of every single other party on the way through. Okay, so can we just put to bed this idea that there was some sort of a wholesale fraud, that they weren't counting them properly, etc.? The AEC, in my opinion, are one of the better electoral systems and adjudicators in the world. They're a lot better than the Victorian Electoral Commission, I'll tell you that. And in my opinion, we do not have a problem with wholesale fraud in our electoral system at the federal level. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have problems. For example, one of the problems that a lot of people have been talking about is the AEC incorrectly telling people not to tick the box, not to number the box above the grouped independent Senate candidates. What do I mean by that? People like Morgan Jonas, Monica Schmidt, others, they were grouped together, so they had their own column in the Senate. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to address this particular comment here. So, mate, if you go back and have a look at what I've just described, they only take that shortcut if it's mathematically inevitable that it will not make a difference, right? Understand, if the freedom vote is only 15%, we are not winning a lower house seat. We're not in a position to become that second out of the last three, that magic moment that I described in my previous marbles videos. So what's the point of voting if they assume and count my vote for the other preference party? They only assume and count your vote straight to them if it makes no difference. If there's just not enough other people that have voted like you for the minor parties. If more people had voted for the minor parties, then all of what I described in the first marbles video, all of that would have played out and things would have been counted in full. The problem is we only got at best 15%. In many places, we got 7-8% combined between Liberal Democratic Party, One Nation, UAP, IMOP, GAP, AFP, etc. We got nowhere near enough for it to actually matter. So that's why, right? What's the point? Well, the point is that if you and enough other people do it, it then makes a difference. If it's just you, sorry, but there's not enough. There's not enough of us, unfortunately. And that's the big lesson out of this election. And I'll talk about the coming Victorian election right at the end, because I think there's some lessons to be learned. And I have a strategy that I need your help with to try and make sure that we don't see a repeat of this at the Victorian election. But I'll get to that at the end. Yeah, my cigar's gone out already. So that's the lower house. The lower house, in my opinion, has been well counted. The results are actually correct. I think we can actually accept the results as they've been described. And there's a lot of people who always want there to be fraud. They're sort of sitting there going, yeah, no, there was fraud. There has to have been fraud. No, it's worse than that. It's worse than that. There are people who showed up to rallies in Melbourne and in Canberra who then went home and voted for one of the major parties or voted for the Teals. That's the brutal, harsh reality. Such is the political apathy, the political ignorance, the lack of understanding around what's actually at stake, that there are people who have actually, they've brushed shoulders with us. They're on the fringes of the movement, but they don't get it. They don't understand. And they went back and they walked into that polling booth and they just did what they've always done and voted how they've always voted, or turned to the teals, etc. So it's way worse than a conspiracy, right? Conspiracy is comparatively easy to deal with. People's apathy is very, very difficult. Now, let me get back to the AEC giving out incorrect information around the the grouped independent Senate candidates. That's an issue, and shouldn't have happened. The unfortunate reality with the AEC is that an enormous number of their people are actually very undertrained. Obviously, the AEC, when there's not an election happening, the AEC don't need very many staff. When there is an election happening, they need a huge number of staff. Most of them are brought on as casuals for a short-term contract, and they don't actually understand very well how the system works or what they're doing. They're just basically doing what they're told. Monkey see, monkey do. Someone said it to them, so they say it to the next person. That's not how it should be, but that's how it is. And I would suggest that the onus is on us to improve the quality of our own education. I would suggest that there's a lot of people out there peddling conspiracy theories that probably just need to pick up the AEC Scrutiny's handbook and actually just read it and go, okay, this is how it actually works. I understand now. And on the one hand, that will stop people from spreading misinformation. And the second benefit is that will actually allow them to put straight the AEC staff members where it's necessary to do so by being able to point out chapter and verse in the Scrutiny's handbook. I'm sorry, I understand that that's what you think is the case, but actually this is what it says, right? The reality is you could have voted for the grouped independent candidates in the Senate above the line. You could have numbered them the same as anything else. However, I don't think that misinformation made a meaningful difference. We simply didn't have the votes. That's the brutal reality. We can get up in arms about all kinds of other things, but the problem is we didn't have the votes, right? And until we fix that problem, all the other stuff is just noise. It's just a distraction. So, all that stuff around, being told you had to use a pen, that it's going to get thrown out if you used a pen. I don't believe any votes have been thrown out because someone used a pen. I'd be very surprised if that was the case anywhere. Because there is simply nothing that tells you have to use a pencil. The AEC used to provide pens. They were on a string to the ballot boxes, to the cardboard ballot boxes. They used to provide the pens in there. Along came COVID, and they couldn't have people touching the same pen, or the paranoia that came along with that. So they've switched over to pencils. And then this whole conspiracy theory went around as to why they might be using pencils. Relax, guys. They're using pencils because they weren't allowed to have people handling the same pens, okay? Settle down. And yes, you're allowed to vote in pen. I would be amazed if a single vote anywhere in the country was thrown out on the basis that someone used a pen instead of a pencil. Let's just relax about all of that stuff. So Emmy, this is very kind of you, Emmy. Emmy says, yep, I did. It took me a day of shock, but after reading the handbook, it made sense. Yes, reading the handbook makes a very big difference. Luckily, I only shared my thoughts with you, Topher, and looked like an idiot in the process. You didn't look like an idiot. You just looked like someone who hadn't read the handbook. And now that you've made that comment and I've put that up online, now you look like an idiot in front of the whole world. So you're welcome, Emmy. No, Emmy is actually awesome. She's in Tassie and was just one of the amazing people that really, really helped my campaign. So thank you, Emmy. I just wanted to give you a hard time. So yes, read the handbook. Nothing nefarious happened with the pens. What happened with the grouped independents with the unmarked above the line boxes was unfortunate. It was misinformation coming from the AEC, but I don't believe that was strategic. I think that was actually just ignorance on the part of the AEC. It's not acceptable. It's something we should be calling out and we should be demanding better. But I don't think it's representing an actual attempt to game the system, nor did we have the numbers for it to actually make a difference anyway. So let's all settle down on all that stuff. The problem is we didn't have the numbers. So Debbie, the difference is that with the pencils, they're basically disposable. Whereas with the, so Max is saying where he was, the pencils were tied to the polling booth with string. That's hilarious. I wasn't aware of that. Where I went, they had a box of clean pencils and then you could drop your used pencil back in a different box and they were sanitizing them. That's my understanding is that's why they went to pen. That's what it was supposed to be about. It was a cost-saving measure because they didn't want to have to buy that many pens for people. Okay. So what have we addressed? We've talked about the way it was counted. We've talked about the misinformation around the unmarked boxes above the line. We've talked about the pens versus pencils. All right. Let's talk about the Senate in Tasmania because this is pretty interesting. Now, I did a whole spreadsheet on this earlier, and then promptly left it on my other computer, and I don't have it on the computer that I'm actually broadcasting from. But what I will have to do then is kind of talk you through it, because I can't really show you without actually having the spreadsheet. So, bottom line is, in Tassie, despite some amazing efforts from some really fantastic people, we only got about 5,500 primary votes at this counting. Now, they're about 80% counted at the moment, a bit over 80% counted. So I'll probably end up with somewhere around about the 6,000, 6,500 maybe, people who actually directly voted for me, which, you know, in a state of it is Australia's smallest state by population. In obviously, the Northern Territory is smaller by population, but that's a territory. That's not a disgraceful showing. It's actually approximately a doubling of the previous best from the Liberal Democratic Party in Tasmania. So that's nice, and that's a testament to the hard work of all the volunteers that I had. But that shouldn't, you wouldn't think that would be enough to put you in the running for a Senate seat, especially not now. Back 2 federal elections ago, back when there were the group voting tickets, back when the parties were directly doing preference deals, not just preferencing in terms of who they put where on their how to vote cards, but actually preferencing, they actually had the power back then to direct people's preferences. They don't have that anymore. So back then it was possible for senators to get in on razor-thin margins from some nowhere position. That got changed prior to the 2019 election. I actually think it's a good change, so that your vote only goes where you say it should go on your ballot paper. No one else, none of the parties get to direct your votes anymore. I think that's a good reform, but it does have the effect of reducing the likelihood of micro parties and minor parties getting that Senate seat, because they're in less of a position to kind of make sure that all of the preferences come to them. But there's an interesting thing that happened in this particular election that we noticed in a couple of different ways. It seems as though the Liberal Democratic Party as a party, and I as an individual, am very palatable to a pretty broad political spectrum. So we found ourselves with a lot of different parties happy to put us in second place on their how to vote cards, and a lot of voters happy to put us second. You know, they might have voted for the shooters, fishers, farmers first, but they put us second. Or they voted for UAP first, but they put us second. Voted for Liberals first, but they put us second. And so we found ourselves in a position where actually a lot of the political parties were very happy to put us second or third on their how to vote cards. And a lot of voters have been very happy, even if they, they might have someone else that they prefer that little bit more. Let's not forget, I'm not even, Tasmanian. I'm an outsider, and that people, don't like that. And that's fair enough. And so therefore they might not want to put me first, but they'll put me second. And what that has meant is that if you look at the how to vote cards and you compare the position of all of the minor parties, freedom-friendly minor parties as well as the others, the Liberal Democratic Party is actually in probably the best position out of all of them. So one of the first parties to get knocked out in Tassie is going to be the Australian Federation Party. I would expect I'd pick up a decent number of preferences from them. It's only a small number of votes. It's a couple of hundred votes, but I'll probably pick up half or so of their preferences. The other half might go to IMOP or UAP or One Nation or other parties like that. The second party to get knocked out is going to be IMOP. They got about 900 votes at the current counting, so they'll probably top out at a bit over 1,000 votes in total. Again, I might pick up half of those because it seems like our brand and me is very palatable to a lot of people as a second place. So these aren't big numbers, but they all help that little bit. Then there's a bunch of left-leaning parties that are going to get knocked out after that. Things like the Stop Development Party, Animal Justice Party. There's a few others like that that'll get knocked out, and their preferences overwhelmingly are going to go towards the Greens, towards Labor, and the one that matters, towards Jackie Lambie. Now, Jackie Lambie is a really interesting group. It doesn't call itself a party. They call themselves a group. They sit in a really interesting space politically, kind of a little bit like us, I guess. Not like us at all in terms of their policies, but like us in the sense that there's quite an interesting mix of parties that are actually quite happy to play nice with the Jackie Lambie Party. So she's a lefty, She's a big government lefty. But for example, she had put the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party second on her how to vote card because she's also a country girl and, supports primary production, supports, the control of pests and that sort of thing. So kind of an interesting mix there. And it makes it very difficult to predict in what percentages are preferences from things like the Stop Development parties and the Animal Justice parties, et cetera, going to go to Jackie Lambie. Maybe the Animal Justice Party people won't put Jackie Lambie on there because she supports shooters, but maybe they will because she's also a big government lefty like them. Who knows? How do you know? So there's a couple of left-wing parties that are going to then go through and get eliminated next, and most of their preferences are going to go to go to Labor, go to the Greens, or some of it will go to Jackie Lambie. Now, Jackie Lambie is the one that we need to get over the top of. So as things stand at the moment, the Liberal Party have 2.2 quotas. So there's 6 Senate seats available. The Liberal Party are definitely getting 2 in Tasmania, and then they've got some spare votes left over. They are going to become very important later on. The Labor Party have about 1.92 or 1.94 quotas, so almost 2, and they will get 2 senators in. But in order to get that second senator, they might have to absorb some preferences from the Greens or from some other place in order to get all the way up to a full second quota. They might need that little bit of help, but they'll get there. There's no question about that. They will definitely get there. The Greens definitely have a quota as well, and they've just got a fraction left over, just enough left over that if it was their preferences that went to Labor, that would get Labor up to 2. So what we have at the moment is 2 kind of conservative senators with the Liberals, and I put that in inverted commas because they're not really a conservative party at all. And then we've got 3 on the left-wing sort of side of politics, if you will, 2 Labor and 1 Greens, and that's pretty much settled. So that's 5 out of the 6 are settled. Jackie Lambie's in the box seat. She's got 0.6 of a quota. Now, a quota at the moment is 42,466 votes or something like that, if my memory serves me correctly. 42,677 votes mid-afternoon this afternoon, last time I looked at it. So that's how many upper house votes you need to have, including preferences, in order to get a senator in. So Jackie Lambie is currently sitting on about 60% of a quota, just on her primary vote. So she's done really, really well on her primary vote. The question is, will she pick up enough preferences to get her across the line? Where will the Animal Justice Party preferences go? Where will the Stop Development preferences go, etc.? So after Animal Justice, etc., get knocked out, then we start to get to the very first of the sort of the bigger freedom-friendly minor parties. And as things stand right now, Elizabeth has noted I am leaning on here, and yes, that is the desk that I have my computer on is I'm leaning on and making the camera bounce. Well observed. Okay, so then it's going to be, unfortunately, it's going to be the United Australia Party that get knocked out first, unless there's a bit of a late surge from them, which can happen. There is still about 20% of the votes to be counted. But I'm currently ahead of UAP, Diana Adams, the UAP candidate, lovely. I'm ahead of her, I think, by about 800 votes or so, if my memory serves me correctly. So the UAP will get knocked out before I do. I should pick up a lot of the UAP preferences. Number 1, because obviously we're all on this message of preferencing each other. Number 2, because they actually put me second on their how to vote card. So anyone that's followed their how to vote card, I'm next. So that should boost me by a good, 3,500, 4,000, maybe 4,500, 5,000 votes by the time it's all said and done. And that really has the effect of catapulting me up the order in terms of who's going to get knocked out next. I was pretty close to getting knocked out, but thanks to a really solid preference flow from the UAP, that's going to really push me up quite a lot. What that does is it pushes me up above the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, who have done really well. They're actually ahead of me right now, but they're not expected to get strong preference flows. And so when push comes to shove, they're likely to get knocked out before I do, because like I said at the start, I'm just in this position where I've got really good preference flows. So shooters, fishers and farmers get knocked out. I should be able to pick up a decent percentage of their preferences. A lot of them will have preferenced One Nation. Some of them will have preferenced Jackie Lambie. But also some of them will have preferenced either myself or the UAP. And the UAP ones, once the UAP is knocked out, it skips over them and goes to the next one, with some of which will be me. So I should be able to pick up some decent preferences from the shooters, fishers, and farmers as well. And then, you know what I'm actually going to do? I don't have the spreadsheet, but I just realized I can pull up the tally room AEC. What is under there? Tally room AEC. So if you're looking at the tally room, note that there are two different tally rooms. There's the AEC one, the official actual Australian Electrical Commission one, and then there's the ABC one. I would really urge you to look at the AEC one because it just provides much better information. All right, so I'm just going to, come on, show me the preferences by group. There we go. All right, so let me actually share this page with you. This is going to be better. Sorry, guys, I should have thought of this before. But share a screen. Show me the windows. First preferences by state. Here we go. Okay, so then I'm going to take myself. There we go. Okay, so that's about as big as I can make this at the moment. So what we've got is a situation. This is not what you're looking at here, unfortunately, is not actually ranked by the number of votes. Highest votes at the top, lowest votes at the bottom. It's just done in some kind of a weird way. I'm not quite sure what. Because as you can see in the middle of it, you've got the Australian Federation Party and the Informed Medical Options Party, both of whom have, among the lowest votes. And then further down, you've got people like Pauline Hanson's One Nation, which has a lot more votes. So it's going to take a little bit of looking at this. And I would suggest if you just search AEC Tally Room, go to the Senate tab, Tasmania, and then look at first preferences by group, then you'll be looking at the same thing as well. That's a good point that someone has just made. You can sort it. Of course you can. I can see that. Why did I not do that already? There we go. Okay. There you go. Thank you to the person who made that comment. So, Sky, thank you for that comment, Sky. Oops. Now, what I'm also going to do is actually just get rid of this. Get rid of that. There we go. Okay. So that's about as good as it's going to get. I'll get rid of that as well. Okay, so now we can all kind of see what's going on. So down the bottom here, you've got a whole bunch of, you've got the Australian Federation Party at the very, very bottom. So they're going to be the first people to get knocked out. I should pick up some of their preferences, as will UAP, One Nation, etc. Then you've got an unendorsed, ungrouped, amalgamated sort of cluster. This is a bunch of different candidates that they've all kind of thrown in together. They will get eliminated one at a time. So they would have actually already been eliminated before the Australian Federation Party. It's just on this graph, they're all just lumped in together. It's such a small number of votes. I'm not going to try and sit there and figure out what's going to happen with theirs. Then you get to the Informed Medical Options Party. Unfortunately, at the moment, sitting at under 1,000 votes. They're probably going to end up with over 1,000 by the time it's all said and done. But those are going to flow to myself, to UAP, to One Nation primarily. And then we get to this group of left-leaning parties that I was talking about that get eliminated. The Sustainable Australia Party, sitting there with 2,747. I'll just do that just so that you can see it. And then we're moving up from there, the Animal Justice Party getting eliminated, and then the Local Party getting eliminated. Now, altogether, this actually adds up to a substantial amount of votes. We're up over 10,000, 11,000 votes between the three of them. But they're all going to head towards the left of politics. They're all going to head towards the Greens, towards Labor, and crucially towards Jackie Lambie, because she's sitting there with a very healthy primary vote of 25,288, which puts her very much in the driver's seat for getting the last Senate seat. But it ain't over. Because what happens after this group of sort of lefty parties gets eliminated is we then get to the first of the freedom-friendly parties being eliminated. And that, like I said, is the United Australia Party. And that brings us up to basically where we were before I remembered that I could pull this up and actually show it to you. Now, they've got nearly 5,000 votes. They'll have probably 5,500 votes by the time it's all said and done. I'm only ahead of them by about 800. So it's possible that they may overtake me and I may end up being the one that gets eliminated first. That's entirely possible. But as things stand right now, they are going to get eliminated as the first of the larger freedom-friendly parties. Now, their vote, like I said, should go substantially to me. I should pick up, of the 5,000 votes that they've got now, or the 5,500 they have in the end, I should pick up 3,500, 4,500 votes out of them, boosting me from being 5,700, or by the time it's all done, maybe 6,000, 6,500, boosting me up closer to that 10, maybe 10,500 mark. The next people to get eliminated are going to be the Shooters, Fishers, and Farmers Party. Now, they've done well. They've got 1.8% of the primary vote, but unfortunately for them, they're not benefiting from much in the way of preferences. So the Australian Federation Party, the Informed Medical Options Party, and the United Australia Party, none of those have really directed strong preferences in their direction. So they're going to get eliminated next, most likely. Now, their preferences are going to spread between some Liberal, some Jackie Lambie, because she is on the side of shooters, so she does have some support in that world, some to Pauline Hanson, One Nation, and some to me. In what ratio is, quite frankly, anyone's guess. It's actually really, really difficult to predict. Enable refresh. So this is actually refreshing. And it also then, there we go. So it's refreshing the results as we go. So that'll be the Shooters, Fishers, and Farmers Party eliminated. Now, remember, I'm no longer in this position here, because my vote count is no longer 5,700. I've benefited from a huge number of preferences from the UAP and a small number of preferences from Shooters, Fishers, Farmers, IMOP, and Australian Federation Party. So I'm no longer here. I'm much more likely to be up around the same level as Pauline Hanson's One Nation at this point in time. So the next people to actually get eliminated is going to be Legalized Cannabis Australia, which is actually really interesting, because the Liberal Democratic Party has a policy platform where we want to decriminalise cannabis. We don't necessarily think that everyone should be taking it, but we also don't think that people should be being thrown in prison for the so-called crime of growing and smoking a plant. I mean, I do the same thing with a different plant. Basically, our position is, if the demonstrable harms of a given drug are lower than the demonstrable harms of alcohol and tobacco, then we probably should treat them more like we treat alcohol and tobacco. And we put cannabis into that category for sure. So informed legalized cannabis voters should be putting us pretty high in their preferences. My concern is that we don't have a lot of brand recognition. And so a lot of them are actually going to go to the Greens or to others more left-leaning parties. However, here's the crucial thing at this crucial moment, because it's going to be very close at this point between me and Pauline Hanson's One Nation. And from my perspective, the crucial question here is, do I pick up enough of those preferences from Legalized Cannabis Australia to guarantee that I'm in front of Pauline Hanson's One Nation so that I can continue to climb that ladder? One Nation are not likely to get very many preferences out of the legalized cannabis crowd. So I think there's a good chance here that I would pick up enough preferences from the legalized cannabis crowd, maybe another 2,000, maybe another 3,000 if I'm lucky, to put me firmly ahead of Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Now, that's a crucial moment, where that's a crucial hurdle that I may fail to get over. And if I do, I'll be the next one eliminated, and my preferences will end up with Pauline Hanson's One Nation, because whilst UAP was second on our ticket, they already got eliminated way down here. Okay, so that's a stumbling block right there. Will I get over that hurdle or not? I don't know. But can you see how what I described in the marbles video is very much playing out here, where I've gone from being here, now pushing my way up and potentially actually heading up above Pauline Hanson's One Nation because of the gathering of all of the preferences of the other freedom-friendly minor parties. This is exactly what I describe in those videos. So let's assume for a moment that I do come over the top of Pauline Hanson's One Nation, that I end up with, say, 12,000, 12,500, or actually, well, they'll have 12,500 by the time the counting's done. So I would have to get up above 12,500, 13,000 at that point in time. At that point in time, I'm going to overwhelmingly pick up Pauline Hanson's preferences because we're third on their ticket, and the party in second will have already been eliminated. So therefore, they get skipped and they come to me. And now, after all that work, I'm sitting somewhere up around the 26,000, 27,000 votes mark, which might look good, because you might look at it and think, oh, well, that puts you ahead of Jackie Lambie. Well, no, it doesn't. Number one, Jackie Lambie is going to continue to pick up more votes because there's still 20% of the count left to be done. Secondly, Jackie Lambie will have picked up a number of preferences along the way here. So this is a real problem. What actually needs to have happened in order for me to get over the top of Jackie Lambie at this moment in time and to not end up being eliminated is for a number of votes to have gone to neither of us or Jackie Lambie. So a lot of those left-leaning parties, the sustainable development guys, the legalized cannabis guys, etc., what I'm counting on is that they may not have preferenced me, but they also didn't put Jackie Lambie in their list. And if that's happened, then their vote is sitting in with Labor, sitting in with the Greens, sitting in with the Liberals, or it's exhausted and it's not even being counted anymore. So I'm counting on, this is where it starts to get really dicey for me. And this is why I say I'm still only maybe a 1 in 5. I think it's more likely that Jackie Lambie wins this seat than that I do. Okay, but I'm just talking you through the scenario of what would have to happen in order for me to get there. So Jackie Lambie has to have not benefited too much from the preferences, and I have to have benefited from really strong preference flows in order for me to overcome the advantage that she already has here. Now, there's a little trick sitting here just above Jackie Lambie that I should have explained at the very start. So you can see the Greens here. Sorry, I'll try and highlight the entire. There we go. Did that work? Yeah, okay. So the Greens are sitting, went off. The Greens are sitting there on 46,000 votes, but a quota is actually, well, it's gone up since I last saw it. So it's now 42,767 votes for a quota. So you can see 42,000, they've got 46,000. They've already got a quota. And we can see this in the right-hand column here where it says 1.09 or nearly 1.1. Okay, so they have a full quota plus a little bit left over. So what's going to happen for them actually is they're going to get their Senate seat, and then the leftovers will slot them in somewhere down here, down the very bottom. So by this moment, by the time we get to the point that I've climbed my way up here and it's a line ball between me and Jackie Lambie, the Greens will actually already have been eliminated. They will have been eliminated out of this fight because of the fact that they've got a Senate seat and they were only running with the leftovers. Now, the same will have happened with the Labor Party. They will probably get to 2 full quotas in their own right. If they don't, they'll just pick up a few preferences somewhere along the way and they'll get to 2 quotas, but they'll have very little left over. So they would have been down here somewhere just using their leftover quota, and they would have been eliminated and their preferences would have been distributed. Now we come to the really crucial moment. So in the scenario that I've described, there's the only ones we haven't touched yet are the Liberal Party. Oops. The Jackie Lambie is still in, and I'm still in. Now, here's the crucial thing. The Liberals have 2.2 quotas, so they're going to get 2 Senate seats. That's a given. It's their leftovers and where their leftovers go that matters now. And that's actually going to be the kingmaker. That's actually going to be the thing that makes or breaks my run. Because what's actually going to have happened, if the quota is 42,500, let's call it, so the quota is listed up the top here. If the quota, I'm just going to call it 42,500, which means 2 quotas is 85,000. They're sitting on 94,000. I'm going to call it 95,000 for easy numbers. They've got 10,000 excess votes sitting there. Now, by the time all the counting is said and done, because there's still another 30-odd thousand votes to count, they're picking up 30% of the vote. They're actually probably going to be sitting there with an excess of maybe 20,000 votes, right? Now, here is the crucial question. If I get up over the top of One Nation, so I'm sitting on, say, 14,000, they might have 13,000, and I get their preferences, that puts me above 24, or that puts me up around the 25,000 mark. Crucially, what that does is it means that me as the Liberal Democrats, I have more than the leftovers of the Liberals, that third quota for the Liberals. So I'm sitting on 25,000. The Liberals are sitting on 20,000. The Liberal Party then gets eliminated out of the running for a third seat. So they still keep their 2, but they're knocked out of the running for that third one. And all of a sudden, their preferences will be flowing to me because I'm third on their ticket. Number 2 on their ticket is UAP, but UAP have been eliminated long before this moment comes along. So anyone that followed the Liberals' how to vote ticket, which Liberals are notoriously good at just following the ticket and doing what they're told, anyone that's done that will have put me in third, which by now is de facto second, which means that those 20,000 leftover votes from the Liberal Party go straight into my pocket. Now, if I've got 25,000 already and I pick up another 20, I've got 45,000 and that's a full quota. Now, I think it's very important that I reiterate at this moment in time, that is not my expected outcome, right? Let me be completely clear about this. That is not my expected outcome. My expected outcome is that Jackie Lambie will get enough preferences to reach a quota and that I won't be able to either I'll fail at getting over the top of One Nation, or potentially another scenario is that the Liberal Party themselves actually get so many more votes that Erica Betts comes back into play. And that even if I get over the top of One Nation, I can't get over the top of the Liberals' third quota, and my preferences end up getting passed to them. And worst case scenario, Erica Betts gets in, which is not a terrible worst case scenario. And that's why I put him number 6 on my how to vote card in the Senate, was to try and make sure that happened as a last resort, right? So, a couple of good questions here. Daniel asks, what about One Nation? One Nation did really well on their primary vote. Steve Mav, he's quite popular down there. He's campaigned for a lot of different parties and has sort of built a bit of a name for himself down there. So they did quite well on their primary vote. The challenge for them is they're not well positioned when it comes to preferences. And that's why I'm in a bit of a better position to sort of climb the ladder from being lower. When you look at how the preference and the how to vote cards were written, there's a reasonable chance that I'm going to be able to come over the top of One Nation. However, as I pointed out, that is one of the stumbling blocks that I've got to get over, and there's no guarantee that I will. There's no guarantee that I'll get over the top of One Nation. So it could very well come down to One Nation versus Liberal versus Jackie Lambie. That could very well be the scenario. On paper right now, it is 100% Jackie Lambie's. Right. And I think the ABC have tentatively called it for Jackie Lambie. And on paper, I completely understand why they would do that. That's definitely how it looks until you dive deep. And there's two things you have to look at to really understand the way it's going to play out. The way it plays out, obviously, is dependent on how people have voted within their preferences. Now, Tasmania is actually notoriously difficult to predict the preferences for. Tasmania, believe it or not, mainlanders are going to laugh. Tasmania actually has the most sophisticated voting population in Australia. And what I mean by that is they have the highest percentage of people that vote below the line and the highest percentage of people that don't follow the how to vote cards, that actually make up their own mind. So they are a more sophisticated voting population than mainland Australia is. So that actually makes it very difficult to predict what's going to happen with people's preferences. That could benefit me, maybe. I don't think I have the brand awareness over there for it to really, really benefit me, though. So I suspect that that's probably going to work against me and make it more difficult for me. Who knows? But the other big elephant in the room is that third quota for the Liberal Party. And I want to bring back up the screen here. I want to bring back up. So, oops, no, add to stream. There we go. Have a look at the Liberals at the very top here. This is really important to wrap your brain around. If you're following this and you want to be able to watch what happens and unfolds over the next week or so and not get blindsided, this is a really important concept to wrap your mind around. At the moment, the Liberals have 2 Senate seats. They've got 2.2129 quotas. All right. Now, the 2 quotas can be kind of removed from the count. So that's 85,000 out of their count of, call it 95,000. So they've only got 10,000 votes. And people go, 10,000 votes. That puts them down here below Pauline Hanson's One Nation. And then as the votes come in, because there's still another 16% or so, we don't know exactly how the number is going to come out, but we believe at the moment that there's only 78% of all the votes have been counted, right? And yeah, so that number is going to go up. And if you have a look at it and go, okay, 78%, so there's actually another potentially 20% or so to get counted, depending on how many people actually, depending on what the turnout was. So again, I don't know exactly how these numbers are going to work out. There's another 45 or so thousand votes yet to get counted, maybe more. Okay, but let's just call it 45,000 votes to get counted. Now, the fact is, those are not going to be evenly distributed between the Liberals and One Nation, or the Liberals and the Liberal Democratic Party, because they've actually been getting, 9 votes to every one of Pauline Hanson's. They've been getting, where am I? I'm down in Liberal Democrats here. So I'm call it 6. They've been getting 15 votes for every one of mine. And that will continue to happen. Just because their leftover quota is only 10,000 votes, right? Their actual raw vote is 15 times higher than mine. So that means as we're counting these remaining 45,000 votes, the Liberal Party are going to be coming home like a freight train in an effort to try and snag that last Senate spot, right? Do you catch that? People trick themselves. They look at what's left in that how much of the third quota they've got. No, look at how many votes they've got and extrapolate that percentage against the remaining votes to be counted. Don't look at what's left in the quota and extrapolate that number. When you look at the full amount, you can see the Liberal Party are going to come home very strong, and Erica Betts is not out of the running yet to actually come over the top of myself and One Nation and actually still get that third Senate spot, especially given, as some people have been pointing out in the comments, there was a very big effort for people to actually vote for him below the line, to vote for Erica Betts number one below the line. There was a whole kind of campaign around that. So I've still got over 500 people with me, so that can't have been too painful. You guys must have sort of followed that and be up to speed with all of that. So did that make sense? What are the absolutely. Erica Betts ran a below the line campaign and quite a successful one against the wishes of his own party, may I say. He had to bring people in from interstate because local Tasmanian volunteers who were members of the Liberal Party weren't allowed to help him with his campaign. So that's the real deep dive, micro, getting into the weeds level. Tasmania is where political nerds that don't like warm weather retire. Yep. Although in summer, I'll say it's actually the climate's lovely in summer. Election porn. Sandra, thank you. That's very kind. Stopped following, just making Tasmanian jokes. Yeah, fair enough. Take your time, vote below the line. Absolutely. And the Seymour family were an incredible asset to me in Tassie. So thank you guys once again. Chris, good. I'm glad. Trudy, we're okay. Excellent. Okay. So this is the thing. You're spot on here, HQ Lion. If a Betts gets close but no cigar, it's better for me. Yes. What I want, my ideal scenario is that I get over the top of One Nation and I pick up heaps of their preferences, and then I beat the Libs by like one vote, because then as all of their preferences flow to me, my vote count effectively doubles, right? I want Eric to be right in there, just here, and I just come over the top of him, and that's my best case scenario for then coming over the top of the Jackie Lambie party. Now, you're familiar, if you ever did sort of maths or whatever, Kimberly asks a great question. Now, this is really getting into the weeds, and I'm not going to give a detailed answer to this, Kimberly, but it's a great question. I'm sure a lot of people have the same question. I'll just give a very surface answer. How do the AEC decide which votes from the parties with the leftover quota get redistributed and which ones stay with the quota? A lot of them will be the same due to following the how to vote cards, but there will be ones that are different. Let me say it a different way just to make sure everyone understands. You need 42,000 votes for a quota. So those 42,000 votes, they voted number one for Liberal Party, whatever. They get set aside, and then the remaining ones get redistributed according to their preferences out to others, all right? It seems a bit arbitrary which ones got stuck with their first quota and which ones actually carry on. This is where they do some phenomenally complicated maths. And Kimberly, you're not the only one with the question. So Amy's got the same question, others. And James is on to the answer. Fractions. Okay. What they do is incredibly complicated. But again, it's one of those things where once you understand it, and I'm only halfway there, we're now getting down to a level that I don't fully have my head around either. But it is beautiful, it is elegant, and I genuinely think we have one of the best systems in the world. What they do is they actually apportion the preferences from those votes, but they reduce the weighting, so down to 50% or what have you. So the preferences of the people whose votes have already been counted still carry on at a reduced weighting. Now, they do that specifically to avoid this problem of, what if half the voters had a second preference of this party and half the voters had a second preference of that party, but all of the one got counted already, and it's only the others that actually carry on. That's not really representative of the will of the voters. So they designed a system is to actually make those preferences actually live on, just de-weighted. But now we're getting down to a level where I don't even, Dr. Drib says I'll need a glass cutter for my marbles. Yeah, I ain't doing that. So Arthur, this is probably one of those slow chats you do need to catch from the start. But yeah, stick around, have fun. All right. So the answer is it's complicated. Our system does ensure that those preferences do carry on in some capacity. They do still influence the outcome. But I'm just not going to go any deeper into it than that, because quite frankly, we're pushing the limits of my understanding of the system as well. So we've covered the lower house. We've covered the allegations of fraud, that they weren't counting it the right way, the unmarked upper house Senate boxes above the line, pencils versus pens, and now I've gone on a deep dive into Tasmania. Okay. Bayesian statistical normalization. Yes, I don't know. Bayesian statistical normalization. I don't know specifically what the mathematical method is, but yes, it is something along that line. Arthur, thank you. I do appreciate that. John, this is a Honda CBR 1100XX known as the Blackbird. My dog has fallen asleep. I'm impressed that you haven't, mate. Yeah, this stuff is incredibly boring. Okay, so I've covered everything that I wanted to cover on this election, and I want to pivot and talk about the Victorian election in November. And if you're not in Victoria, can I ask you to please stay tuned in, because we're going to need your help just as much as anyone else's. Sean has asked, can I dive deep into Victoria and David Limbrick? No. No, I haven't been watching his numbers closely enough to be able to actually do that. Stephanie, no, look, I haven't touched the missing election writs at all. This is one of those things that I put into the category of, even if I were to shout it from the rooftops, it's not actually going to have any effect. And that might sound defeatist to some people, but we need to put our energy into the place where it's going to make a difference. And any energy that I spend on that issue, it's above my pay grade. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what should or should not have been done with those. And I'm just not going to spend time on it, because my time needs to be focused on the things that can actually make a difference. It's a perfectly valid question. I don't have an answer for you. Sorry. John says, I heard that UAP have a Senate seat in Victoria. It's looking that way, but there is still a pathway to victory for David Limbrick, who obviously, no offense to the UAP and their candidate, I would rather see David Limbrick get up after what he's done for us over the last couple of years here in Victoria. I would much rather see him get up. However, I would much rather see UAP than someone else. So, you know, if it turns out to be UAP, fantastic. James has a funny comment. He says, I studied statistics and calculus to second year of uni, so I don't understand how any of this works, but I do remember understanding it when I was 18. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, okay. So what have we learned? That's what I want to get to. What have we learned? How are we going to get a different result in Victoria? Because honestly, if we see Daniel Andrews continue on as Premier of Victoria after November, that says really, really bad things about us, right? That says really, really bad things about us. The fundamental problem that we have is not the AEC, is not corruption of the system, is not any of that stuff. It's that Australians are lazy and apathetic and unwilling to actually put in the effort and the time to think this stuff through. They walk into that ballot box and they just do the thing they've always done. And they'll whinge and bitch and complain at the barbecue and at the footy on the weekend, etc., about how things are going. And then they walk into the polling booth and they vote the same fucking way that they've always voted. That's the problem. And we saw a pretty substantial swing away from the major parties in this federal election, 5% or so. But a lot of that went to these so-called teal independents. It didn't go to the freedom-friendly parties. In fact, in many seats, One Nation actually lost ground compared to where they'd been in previous elections. The LDP did very, very well compared to previous elections, but we're starting from a very low base. So that doesn't actually represent a huge number of votes. The problem is that Australians are too apathetic. How do we get a different result in Victoria? We need to jar people. We need to jar people and actually really get them back in touch with their anger from 2020 and 2021 and the injustice of what was done. And I have a very specific role that I want to play in this coming Victorian state election. And that is to basically weaponize Battleground Melbourne. Battleground Melbourne, in my opinion, is the tool that we can use to jar people, to bring it all back, to put it fresh in their mind again between now and November, so that when they walk back into that polling booth and they sit there and go, my dad voted Labor and my granddad voted Labor, and I've been a union member all my life, but there is no way I'm putting that turd at the top of my ballot, right? So this for me is my mission now. I've got 6 months of weaponizing Battleground Melbourne, and I need your help to do it. So number one, thanks to you guys funding Battleground Melbourne, I was able to make it, and it's available to watch for free at battlegroundmelbourne.com. Okay, www.battlegroundmelbourne.com. It is free to watch. It will always be free to watch. Please be sharing that. Rewatch it yourself so that it's fresh in your mind. Tag other people, etc. Now, that's one step. But we all know ourselves, if someone sends us a Facebook message, hey, you've got to watch this thing, chance of us doing it, pretty slim, right? Not very high. What is more powerful is someone saying, hey, I've got the DVD, I've got the Blu-ray of this awesome documentary, you got to watch it. Let's have a barbecue at my house, come around, we're going to watch it. Now, you don't need the DVD, you can play it off the internet if you want to. But what I will be doing, and I've already got my graphic designer working on it, is a release of DVDs and Blu-rays. So that those of you that want it for your collection, you can buy it, you can stick it on the shelf, no problem. But the idea is that you buy it and then you take it places and you play it for people and you sit next to them and you make them sit through it and watch it and have that uncomfortable conversation that's going to follow, and be willing to do that over and over and over again. And I just think there's more chance of people taking you seriously if you're walking in there with a Blu-ray in your hand, rather than walking in there going, hey, let's look up Battleground Melbourne on YouTube. So that's what I'm working on right now. We should have the Blu-rays and DVDs up for pre-sale in about a fortnight, and we should be delivering them to you by the end of July or the first sort of week of August, thereabouts. We should be able to get them into your hands. And that gives you August, September, October, and November, 4 months left to burn out the disc, if that were possible, right? Play it so many times for so many different people that brings all those memories back and means that when they walk into that polling booth, they're going to do something different. Okay, so Karen, you've said you haven't watched Battleground Melbourne yet. Can I really encourage you? It is important to just go to battlegroundmelbourne.com. It's completely free to watch. You do have to be signed into YouTube to watch it there because they've age restricted it because of the violence and blah, blah, blah. But so long as you're signed in to YouTube, then you'll be able to watch that for free. It will always be available to watch for free. It was crowdfunded. It was funded by you guys. So it's always going to be available to watch for free. It's hard to watch without getting angry. That's the point. That's the point. We need to shock people. We need to jar people. We need that emotion to go with people into the polling booth. Now, Benjamin, you've read my mind because this is where I was heading next. So the next thing is I'm going to be doing a tour of Victoria, playing Battleground Melbourne in regional cinemas all over country towns and in various parts of Melbourne. I'll be there in person, trying to sort of, I guess, attract as many people as I can to come and watch this thing. And this is an opportunity for you to then invite friends to actually go to the cinema and watch it, because there are some people that are going to be like, oh yeah, you got some DVD, yeah, whatever. No. Come to a cinema, right? It might be Horsham, it might be, Gippsland somewhere, it might be wherever. But come to the cinema and watch this documentary with me. And by the way, we've now won 4 different international awards, and I suspect there's going to be some more in coming months. So you can tell people this is an international multi-award winning documentary about what went down in Melbourne, and you need to see it. Come to the cinema with me. The director's going to be there, right? Etc. We try and turn this into a thing, right? So that you can get your friends to come along, your family to come along, people that are never going to click on a link that you send them. They're not necessarily going to want to sit there in their own home with you, playing a DVD or a Blu-ray, but you might be able to tempt them into coming along to a cinema. So, we turn it into that more of an event feeling sort of thing. So I don't know the dates yet because I need to make sure that I've actually got the DCP. So in order to play in cinemas, you need a digital copyright protected copy of the documentary. It costs about $1,000 to get that made. We're working on that at the moment, so there's going to be a bit of delay there. And then I want to make sure that I've got the DVDs and the Blu-rays, etc. Because as people watch it there, I want people to be then buying that and taking it and saying, "Hey, I've got to play this to my dad. I've got to show this to my brother. I've got to whatever," right? And so we sort of turn this into a machine where you guys help to attract people to those viewings. At those viewings, we impact people, and then hopefully they want to grab a copy to then go and become a node. Make it go viral. That seems a little bit appropriate for the zeitgeist of the day, doesn't it? To make it go viral so that each one of those people then sort of joins, without them realizing it, joins the campaign to try and get as many people as possible to watch Battleground Melbourne between now and the election in November. So with those plans, the release of DVD and Blu-ray, and don't forget, you don't have to buy one. It's available for free. Okay. Some people get upset. They're like, "Oh, yeah, now you're trying to monetize it." No. It's available for free. You can watch it for free. Always will be. If you want the DVD, if you want the Blu-ray, if you want to be a part of this strategy, grab those. Come along to some of these events that we're going to be having all over Victoria, particularly in probably September, October is probably going to be, I'll probably just try and pack it in to those sort of 8 weeks and be in multiple cinemas every week if I can, covering all of Victoria and different parts of Melbourne. I do want to do a big event actually at the Astor Theatre. I want to do the very first cinema showing. I want to be at the Astor Theatre, just because it has the largest seating capacity of any cinema in Melbourne. And I want to show it there and pack out that place just to make a statement. But I need to talk to them first because they do have in their terms and conditions a clause that allows them to choose not to play a movie if they don't like it. And they can make that decision all the way up until, whenever they want, really. They could literally, under the terms of their contract, they could literally turn a movie off partway through. So I need to speak to them and get assurances that that's not going to happen and get that clause removed from that contract. And then I'll be able to go ahead and organize a huge event there. So I'd love to kind of kick off there with a massive event, get as many people as possible in to that event, and then use that as the kickoff to then be traveling around to different parts of Melbourne and Victoria. So Kristen is saying, please do a screening in the smaller metro cinemas. That's exactly the plan. Yeah, to head around and do a bunch of those. Gary's asking, how much do I anticipate they'll sell for? I'm getting quotes at the moment because the production run's going to be relatively small. The price is relatively high to produce them. But at this point, it looks like the DVD is probably going to be $24 and the Blu-ray is probably going to be $29. And then if you want to grab a bunch of them to hand them out, etc., then we'll be doing bundles and deals, etc. I'm not trying to make a lot of money out of this. I need to cover the production costs. I've got to pay some royalties to some of the artists that wrote the songs, etc. So every sale, I have to pay them a proportion. So I've got to make sure I cover all of that. But once that's done, then I just want to get in as many hands as possible. So yes, getting banned is a great way to get more publicity. Yes, if it's a win-win for me. If Astor do turn around and say, no, we're not playing that, I can use that in the publicity. If they do agree to play it and to remove that clause from their contract, then we get to have a great event there. So that's a bit of a win-win. Invite Daniel Andrews to the premiere. Yes, I'll do that. Emmy, that's very kind. No, thank you. People donated already to make the movie possible. But what you can do is buy copies when it's available on DVD and Blu-ray, and that will then help me to recoup the costs of actually doing. So there's a 16-page booklet that we're putting together to actually go in the DVDs and Blu-rays as well. All the cover artwork and then all the technical stuff, getting the masters made, getting the copies made, getting the DCP made, etc. So no, please don't donate. I'll cover all the upfront costs and then I'll just try and recoup those through selling. Showing my age, $30 for a Blu-ray is a bargain. I remember paying $100 for VHS. Wow, what were you watching? Look, like I said, like at $30, I'm still making money. Okay, there is margin there, no doubt about it. But I'm not trying to gouge. I'm not. I just want to get this out there to as many people as I possibly can. I really, really want to take my lefty sister to the cinema. That'll go down well. So, guys, the movie that was banned in St Kilda. That's my strategy for my contribution to the coming November election. And each of us can, we've all got different skill sets. We're all in different positions. We can all contribute in different ways. That's how I see myself being able to contribute the most to trying to change people's habits and trying to change people's ways so that they actually walk into that polling booth and do something different for a change. Yeah. So that's the plan. I need Battleground Melbourne t-shirts with a QR code. Interesting. QR code on the shirt. That'd be a conversation starter. Not a bad idea, actually, Benjamin. I'll have a chat because we've already got a QR code. I'm just going to make sure it goes to the right place. Actually, yeah, it does. It goes to the battlegroundmelbourne.com. So we've already got the QR code. I could definitely do that. Interesting. I'll have a chat with the team. Arthur says yes for QR code t-shirts. Okay. I will add that to the list of things to discuss with the team. And I know some people have said that they want posters as well. And I'm more than happy to provide those. But full disclosure, that'll just be to help me pay my bills, right? The posters I don't imagine are going to necessarily change a lot of people's votes. But if you want one, I'm more than happy to organize that. But please know that that's literally just helping me to pay my bills and keep doing what I do. Okay. All right, another vote for the t-shirt. It would be a lot of fun to really try and hit Mulgrave hard. It's a fairly safe Labor seat, if my memory serves me correctly. I haven't looked it up recently, but if my memory serves me correctly, I believe it's a fairly safe seat. So I don't know that we'd necessarily get him kicked out of his seat. But I would you know what I would love? I would absolutely love for Daniel Andrews to actually get re-elected, but to be in opposition, and for him to have to sit there, because I reckon he'd spit the dummy and he would just quit and force a by-election. I don't think he'd be able to stay there. So I reckon you could have some fun with him actually winning his seat, but losing government. QR codes on a mask. Okay. Yeah, look, I hear this stuff, talking 17% swing in Daniel Andrews' local booths, etc. Yes. At the same time, we saw the polls prior to the federal election and they just didn't play out. They didn't play out in reality when people walked into that polling booth. So, don't know. All right, so that was really what I wanted to cover tonight. I've covered all of it now. What are we? Oh, only an hour and 20 minutes in. There you go. There is more stuff that I want to talk about. There's some really good questions coming in to do with the Liberal Democratic Party's name and other stuff like that. So I'll get to those in just a sec. But I want to kind of wrap up this and say, I hope I've helped to allay some fears around what happened with the lower house counting and the AEC. I hope that I've been able to whet your appetite for what's happening in the Senate, at least in Tasmania. You've got more of an idea of what to look out for and how things are likely to play out. I'll repeat just for the sake of absolute clarity. At the moment, the ABC are predicting that Jackie Lambie will get the last Senate seat in Tasmania, and that is the most likely outcome. She's in a very strong position. That is the most likely outcome. There is a pathway to victory for me, a very strong one in my opinion, but still a minority chance. There is a pathway, although an even smaller chance to victory for Steve Mav of the Pauline Hanson's One Nation. And there is, although relatively difficult, it's a needle to thread for him, but there is a pathway to victory for, gosh, I've just gone blank, Erica Betts, the number 3 Senate candidate for the Liberals. So really, it's going to come down to these four. Will it be Jackie Lambie? If it's not her, it'll probably be me, but it'll probably be her, right? It's not Jackie Lambie. It's Tammy Tyrrell is the candidate there. Will it be Tammy Tyrrell for the Jackie Lambie network? Most likely, yes. If it's not her, it's most likely me. If it's not me, it's probably Steve Mav. And if it's not Steve Mav, it's going to be Erica Betts. So that's how I see this playing out in order of probability. Okay. And then finally, I need your help to help me to weaponize Battleground Melbourne. We've got it. It's an amazing hour and 40-minute award-winning documentary that you guys helped me to make. That you guys wrote the story, right? I told the story, but you guys are the ones that wrote it. You wrote the story. I had the privilege of telling the story. Now let's use it. Let's weaponize it to try and get Daniel Andrews kicked out, or at the very least, not in government. Okay, so Marcus, that's just to tie a bow on that. That's what I had prepared to cover. That was a really high priority that I wanted to cover tonight. So that's kind of the end of the official stuff that I wanted to say. I am more than happy to keep chatting. I've got probably another half hour or so on the cigar, and I haven't even poured any scotch yet. So I really need to do that. And while I'm doing that, let me answer some of your questions as well. So this is a good question. It was painfully clear that the name Liberal Democratic Party was working against us in Tassie, and that's the same feedback I'm getting from everywhere else. The Liberal name is toxic, with good reason. They're a nothing party that stands for nothing, and it did us no favors by being associated with them. At a federal level, the party has to change its name. They've got no choice. They lost a court case. So if you don't know the history of this, the Liberal and Labor Party teamed up to pass legislation saying that no new political party can use a name that's already being used by another political party, can use a word. So the word Liberal, off limits, the word Labor, off limits, etc. Now that makes sense in the case of some words that are quite specifically branded, like Greens or something like that. But the word liberal actually had a meaning long before it was used in a political context. The word liberal means, to be liberal with something means to be free, to be generous. And the word liberal historically has talked about liberty and freedom. The Liberal Party today are anything but a party of freedom. So it kind of grinds my gears a little bit that they're basically patenting that name or trademarking that name and saying no one else is allowed to use it. Well, that would be all well and good if you were using it well, but you're actually abusing the English language at this point. But it is what it is. They passed the legislation. The Liberal Democratic Party challenged that in court, and we lost, unfortunately. So at a federal level, we have to change the name. We don't actually have to change the name at a state level, but we probably will anyway, just to have consistency of the brand across federal and state. And because the reality is the Liberal Democratic name is not working for us. It doesn't help us. There's a number of possible names being bandied around, the Liberty Party, the Freedom Party, and a whole bunch of variations on those themes. I don't know which one is going to be selected. That's something that will happen at the national executive level, and they'll consult with members and so forth. And then the states will then have to make their own decisions about what they want to do. So we are well aware of the issue with the branding. The name is a problem. The color scheme is also a problem, where it's not... It was too similar, so that when people saw the word liberal and then looked at the logo and the color scheme, it didn't make them go, oh, wait, hang on, this isn't the Liberal Party. The color scheme actually reinforced the idea that we might have been the Liberal Party. So the whole thing's a problem, and the whole thing is being changed. We want an entirely different color. The problem is most of the colors have already been used. Historically, yellow has actually been the color for libertarian freedom-based movements, the Gadsden flag being an example of that. Cigars do this sometimes. They just suddenly want to go out. So yellow, unfortunately, is already in wide use with other political parties. So yellow as a color is problematic. Orange, again, problematic, already in use. The color purple has been mooted because that's not really used in Australian politics. I happen to really like the color purple as well. So I'm all for it. The problem is that purple is the color for the Australian Electoral Commission. And they're quite, I was going to say precious. That's a bit unfair. Their job is to make sure that the elections are not being unduly influenced. And one of the things that I don't like is people using colors similar to theirs, because people might confuse the communication as having come from the AEC. So using purple has challenges in its own right, but potentially if we were to pick a purple that was distinctly different from the AEC purple, then we might be able to do something like that. But all of these are conversations that have to happen. But they're going to happen amongst a much larger group of people than just myself. But be aware, we are aware of the problem. Trust me, we are aware of the problem, and we are going to fix it. Will there be a Battleground Victoria show bag for the Royal Melbourne Show? No, I'm not sure what I would put in it, to be honest. I haven't been to the show in about 33, 34 years. I think I went once as a kid and found the whole thing actually quite underwhelming. So no plans there. Can I get Adam Somyurek to tweet about the movie? At the moment, I can't even get Adam Somyurek to reply to me. So probably not, unfortunately. I'd love to have done an interview with him by now, but he's doing his own thing, and that's fine. He's entitled to do that. But if anyone knows how to get through to him and can get him to tweet about it, that would be amazing. Give one to your nana. Absolutely. There's a lot of people that just aren't used to watching content on YouTube the way that my generation is. Older people, they want the DVD, they want the Blu-ray, or they want the VHS. I'm not releasing it on VHS, but you have my permission. If you get the DVD or the Blu-ray, you have my permission to make a copy onto a VHS and give it to your nan if that's how she needs it. Libertarian Party was one of the things that we discussed, but that carries a lot of baggage from America. It's a very Americanized word. It shouldn't be. It should be a universal English language word, but it has kind of become Americanized. Freedom Alliance. Oh, that was one other thing I wanted to talk about, was people suggesting that maybe the problem was that there were too many freedom parties and that we'd sort of split the vote. Well, even when you combine the totals of everyone that voted for all of the different freedom parties at various levels of freedom, if you combine the vote for all of them, it just wasn't enough. Fundamentally, the issue wasn't that we split the vote. The preferential system fixes that problem anyway. But even so, that was not the problem, because they're just, even combined, there just weren't enough people voting for freedom. That's an interesting point, actually. I hadn't thought about the New Liberals using the word liberal in their name. Interesting. The Democrat name is also trash. We need to get away from that. The Liberty Party, that's a front runner at the moment. I'd be very happy to do a showing in Griffith. I know it's not in Victoria, but I'd be very happy to duck up there. I like Griffith, and I'd be happy to do, particularly around that sort of the border area, southern New South Wales. I'd be happy to include that in the tour. I think Matthew Guy is a huge problem. He's got no credibility at all when it comes to speaking about being any kind of alternative. So this is a problem. So when Linda's son saw the flyers, he said to me, "Why are you voting for the Liberals? I didn't think you would vote for them." That's the problem, and that's the problem that we need to fix. In Canada and in the US, by the way, Liberals are the leftists. The word liberal has been taken over by the left of the politics. I don't think the Liberal Party would promote the film in any way at all, because it makes David Limbrick look very good, as it should, because he was very good, or is very good. And also because they were equally weak. They were not going to do any better. If we'd had the Liberal government in power, I don't think they would have done any better than what Daniel Andrews did. Freedom Party. The word freedom has kind of been damaged by its use by the UAP. And I know I have a lot of UAP supporters that watch. So I'm not intending to offend anyone, but the UAP are not a freedom party in the broad sense of the word. They're very good on COVID. They're good on freedom of speech. They're good on some aspects of international treaties and that sort of stuff. But they are ultimately a big government socialist party. They just want the government welfare to be going to their pet causes. So I don't think that they really are a freedom party in the genuine sense of the word. And this is the problem with the merger idea, merging all the parties. You've got something like Pauline Hanson's One Nation. Okay, now Pauline is not going to give up control of her party, with good reason. She built that party at tremendous personal cost. Let's not forget they threw her in prison. And she came back from that, and she's kicked their asses ever since. So what incentive does she have to share power over her party? She doesn't. This is her baby. She built this from nothing at tremendous personal cost. Then you've got the UAP with Clive Palmer has poured enormous amounts of money into his party. And he wants to have control over that party's policies and what they pursue, etc. And fair enough, he's poured in a lot of money. I can understand that. Liberal Democrats, we're a principles-based party. We're not beholden to any one personality, and we're not beholden to a paymaster who has paid our bills for us. And so we don't really want to throw our lot in with them either. So there's good reasons why we're separate. But understand, being separate is not a problem because we have the preferential system. The preferential system allows us to all campaign separately on the areas where we're at our best. attract the people that are best attracted to our brand, and then share preferences to make sure that those votes actually gather into a single place, which is exactly what we did with this election. It's a good strategy. We just didn't get enough people in total on board. That's the problem. So a merger, I don't think, is actually going to help. Yep. Gary ran for us, and well done, Gary. Good campaign. But yeah, the name is confusing. Absolutely, it is. Okay, Morgan's going for the Freedom Party name in Victoria. Okay, that's interesting to know. So, Stormy, it's not that we didn't listen. Change takes time. And because of the great work that David Limbrick did under the Liberal Democratic Party name in Victoria, it was our expectation and our hope that he was going to get a lot more traction, and that changing the name had the potential to actually cost votes from David Limbrick. In the end, it didn't work out that way, but there were good strategic reasons not to change the name of the party just before an election, particularly when we had hoped that we had some brand recognition and some brand value in Victoria. So all of those discussions were had. It's not that we weren't listening. We had very robust conversations around that, and we chose to stick with the name that people, or that we hoped people knew us under at that point. Yep, so Morgan Jonas has just named his official party the Freedom Party. Yep, okay. Oh, wow, Daniel says, I'm smoking slow. That's unusual, Daniel. Normally I finish before you, so that's interesting. You must be cold up there. You're smoking fast to try and keep warm. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people like this one big party idea, but I'm sorry, it's not going to happen, and it's not necessary. We have a preferential voting system. Purple has been used for republics. The Republican Party, you mean? I'd wear a hot pink T-shirt if it helped us get more votes. Yeah. Well, if we go for like a hot pink shade of purple, just to keep the AEC happy, that could work. Q Monty Python, the People's Front of Judea. No, it's the Judean People's Front. Get it right. If you don't know Monty Python, that's going to make no sense to you at all. So a coalition is interesting. That is more doable than a merger of the parties. That could certainly happen. But the reason why something like the coalition between the Liberal Party and the Nationals Party works is because the Liberal Party were clearly the bigger of them. So when you have a coalition, you have to have agreements around, well, if we get into power, which party gets to have the Prime Minister? Right. So with the Liberal National Coalition, the Liberal Party get the Prime Minister, and the leader of the Nationals becomes the Deputy Prime Minister. They've kind of got their cabinet roles all kind of divided up between the Liberals and the Nationals. That's a little bit harder to do when you've got a bunch of smaller parties that are all, there or thereabouts. I mean, One Nation is the biggest, based on the results of this election. One Nation is the biggest of the three main freedom parties: UAP, One Nation, and Liberal Democrats. The negotiations around an official coalition would be tricky. I think in order to get there, we've got to see these parties have parliamentary representation, so some senators, see those senators working together effectively in the Senate from within their own parties, but working together on joint legislation and blocking things, etc. And then out of that, we might see a formalization of some sort of a coalition. But I think it's got to be a step-by-step process. So Nicole, I'm not sure when you joined in the chat, but I talked a bit about how I'm wanting to weaponize Battleground Melbourne to try and make sure that we get rid of Daniel Andrews. So go back and watch that again, or just keep an eye on my Facebook page, because I'll be talking a lot more about that in coming weeks on the page. Someone knows their Monty Python. It's terrifying to me that most young people don't know Monty Python. Monty Python was the universal language when I was growing up. Everyone knew Monty Python, young or old. Now I make a Monty Python joke around sort of 25-year-olds, and they've got no idea what I'm talking about. The Popular People's Front of Judea. That's him over there. Yes, classic humor. We're trying to keep the word count down. This is, the Liberal Party, the Labor Party. Right, you want to keep it nice and simple. Yeah, so just to be clear, when I'm talking about my chances, I'm saying I'm 1 in 5. It's most likely to be Lambie. If it's not Lambie, it's probably next to be me, but I'm only a 1 in 5. If it's not me, it's going to be Steve Mav or Erica Betts. Yeah, but how old are you, John? I'll bet you're not 25. No, Dora, I haven't heard anything about that. That's the first I've heard. If you've got anything on that, I'd appreciate you sending it through. Send me an email, topher@topherfield.net. No, it's not too late to run for the Victorian election. Definitely not. Get in touch with whichever is your preferred freedom-friendly minor party and talk to them about being a candidate. I am definitely not the Messiah. I am a very naughty boy. That's true. I have proof right here. Life of Brian. Yeah. All the Monty Python jokes are coming out. Yeah, John Cleese has come out, and so Monty Python. John Cleese has come out very much as a defender of free speech. It's been very, very good to see. But unfortunately, again, people under about 35 just don't even know who he is. When Daniel Andrews finally falls, do you think he'll be singing "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life"? No, I don't. I think he'll be wondering how it could possibly have happened to someone as perfect as him. I'm not planning to run in Victoria. I didn't particularly want to run in this federal election either. I don't want to be a politician. As I've said many times before, I want to do something useful with my life, and that rules out politics. But they're going to ask me for sure. But no, my current approach to the Victorian election is that I can do a lot more as the director of Battleground Melbourne. Potentially at these showings, I might have the Liberal Democratic Party local representative come along, have people there who can, if someone wants to sign up to the party, etc. So actually help them, but help them from outside of the party. I mean, I'm a member and I'll continue to be a member, but not to actually help them as a candidate, because then a lot of your time gets taken up in the actual campaigning in your local seat or your upper house area. And I think I'm probably going to be more effective and do more for the party covering the whole state and weaponizing Battleground Melbourne. Yeah, and Tim's just said it. Yep. Don't run in Victoria. We need you on the campaign trail supporting the cause all over. Yeah. Yes, I know, Emmy. That's what everyone says. But yeah, I want to do something useful with my life. Politics is the best you can achieve in politics in the current zeitgeist is damage limitation. You can make it less bad, but that's about it. That's all you can really achieve. So this is something that others have talked about. The idea of just a whole heap of us all going and becoming members of the Victorian Liberal Party. And therefore, we get to vote on the pre-selections. We can put up better candidates. We can sort of change it from within. Well, it's a little bit like the what do they call it? Not the Freedom Project, the Free State Project in the US, where they tried to get a lot of people to agree to move to New Hampshire. And as long as a critical mass was reached, they would trigger it, and then everyone would move there, and that would be enough people to swing New Hampshire politics and become a libertarian state. The challenge is getting people to actually follow through and getting enough people to actually do that and sign up. And that would mean not being members of other political parties. I believe that Liberals are one of those ones that has a requirement that you can only be a member of the Liberals. So that would mean resigning from whatever party everyone is in to go and pile in on the Liberals. And when you look at what the Federal Liberal Party have done to the New South Wales Liberal Party, parachuting in candidates, ignoring the actual duly pre-selected candidates in various seats, etc., I have a feeling that what would happen is the Federal Liberal Party would simply step in and thwart whatever it is that we might be achieving. Uh, what if you're a senator? How will you go with your battleground Melbourne? Well, that would be an interesting. It'd be kind of hilarious. There's a couple of very funny things that would happen if and it is still only a minority chance, but if it were to happen, first of all, my court case with the Victorian police is ongoing, and so all of a sudden I'd be standing there in the defendant's dock as Senator Field. That would be kind of amusing. That would just be hilarious, just to have that unfold. And if I do actually get up, then obviously I'm going to have other responsibilities that I need to prioritize as a senator. So that would mean probably handing over the tour to other people to coordinate and to be at. And I would only be able to come to a limited number of them because obviously I've got a job to do at that point. So yes, it would impact it. But overall, I think if the party had a senator, that would only be good for the party's profile, and I would be using every opportunity to make a lot of noise and attract a lot of attention to the party in the lead up to the November Victorian state elections. So either way, it's a win. Someone keeps asking about Michael Malice. I don't actually know who that is, so sorry, I can't comment. I've just lost where I was. Can I do a slow chat with Kate Fantanel? I'd be happy to, now that we're slowly sort of getting back to normal life, post campaign life. Assuming I don't get up as a senator, then I will be continuing the slow chats and doing interviews, etc. And I can certainly put her on the list of people I want to interview. She's good value, no doubt about it. Senator Field screening his film in the Senate auditorium. I'll have to get someone to hack all the TVs, because in every electoral office, every senator's office, and every lower house MP's office in Parliament House, there's a TV that shows question time and all that sort of stuff. I'll have to get someone to hack that and play Battleground Melbourne on that. Yeah, the parachute method doesn't always work, and I was quite pleased to see the back of Christina Keneally. Vera, as much as it would be awesome, please don't pin all your hopes on that. Number one, it's unlikely. Number two, I'm only one person, and one senator is very limited in what you can achieve. Now, there are some other good people in there already. Hopefully there'll be a UAP or a Liberal Democratic senator from Victoria as well. In the Liberal Party, we've got Jared Rennick and Alex Antic. In One Nation, we've got Malcolm Roberts, and we're going to have Pauline Hanson re-elected. So there would be a core of us there that might be able to do something, but it's unlikely that we would actually even hold the balance of power. So it's not like we as a bloc would have the ability to block legislation, unfortunately. So there's only so much that we're actually able to do. So don't get your hopes up too high. Even if I get in, what I'm able to accomplish is going to be limited. That's just the reality. I'll do everything I can, but it will be limited. What will be, exactly. Oh yes, I can't remember the names either, but I remember who you're talking about, Susie. Yes, I should do a follow-up just to find out where their court cases are up to, etc. at some point. Yeah, if we get a freedom senator in every single state, we'll have the balance of power in the Senate. That's very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. It would be a beginning, though, Judy. You're absolutely right. And these things happen gradually. These things happen over time. And if we get, say, 3 or 4 in this electoral cycle and then another 3 or 4 in at the next election, then that's 8 senators potentially. And that starts to have a greater chance of holding that balance of power position. Too many Greens get seats, unfortunately. Yes, they do. Now, what's interesting at the moment, Lizzie, is they used to get the 6th Senate seat. Now they're actually getting a big enough vote that often they're getting the 5th Senate seat, which is actually helping us in a sense, because that 6th Senate seat remains up for grabs. And that's the one that the Freedom parties are actually vying for. So in a way, there's a silver lining there. Yeah, a few freedom-friendly minor party senators in this election is a great start. The next federal, where a few more may change things dramatically. Yeah, that's the thing. We've got to keep the momentum going into the state elections and into future federal elections as well. Oh boy, would I make noise. Boy, would I make noise. And yes, I would have to do at least one slow chat from Parliament House. Will Jacinta Price end up being our friend? Jacinta is very, very good on certain things. I disagree with her on some things. Overall, is she going to be our friend? Yes, overall. She has very good instincts in many areas that matter. And so I was very happy to see her get up. I would have loved for the Liberal Democratic Party's candidate there to have gotten up, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But yeah, Jacinta Price is one of the good guys. The puppies and kittens party. You've heard my story about kittens. This was something that really helped me a lot, actually, to stop caring about criticism. And there was the realization that you could post online. You could just post, "I like kittens." And if enough people saw that post, sooner or later, someone's going to come along and get really, really angry and butthurt about, "Oh, you think you can own animals, or don't you know how the mothers get treated in kitten factory, puppy factories and whatever." You could post the most inoffensive thing, "I like kittens," and someone is going to get angry at you for posting it. So that was actually a bit of a realization for me a few years ago, and it's really helped me to stop caring about people getting angry. If you want to see people getting angry, you should head over to my Instagram, Topher Field on Instagram. On election day, on the 21st, I posted up. I did it on Facebook as well. The video of me eating a sausage in front of the animal rights call flute. On Facebook, everyone went, "Hey, that's funny, whatever." On Instagram, boy, did the vegans come out. It was very, very, very funny. And yes, Tim trolled me on. I did put up a kitten photo a little while ago to try and boost engagement because my page has been being suppressed. And Tim, the unfortunate thing for you is I know your name very well, so I knew instantly that it was just you were just having some fun. So yeah, exactly. What, you hate dogs? Yeah, you'd get all kinds of haters if you say anything. If you say anything online, if enough people see it, you are going to get haters. That's just a fact. And all of us have to actually just get really comfortable and really used to having people dislike us. Right? I think it was Winston Churchill said, "So you have enemies? Good. That means you stood for something in your life." The only way you can not have enemies in your life is if you are a nothing, if you are a non-player character that stands for nothing, does nothing, then you can just be friends with everybody. But the minute you want to actually make a difference and make the world a better place, well, sorry, some people are going to hate you. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, I'm not going to make tonight a long one. I'm still tired. 3 long weeks on the road, and it's been a long couple of years, to be quite honest. And I know it has for a lot of you too. I'm not saying that I'm special in that, but we're all tired, me included. So I'm not going to make it a long one. But thank you so much for joining me tonight. And please keep an eye on my Facebook page, especially, and Instagram. That's where I kind of communicate most frequently. If you only follow me on YouTube, then there's a lot of content that you're not seeing. So follow me on Facebook, Topher Field, or Instagram, Topher Field, and you'll see all my content there. And yeah, I really need a small army of people to get behind this strategy of weaponizing Battleground Melbourne. If I announce that I'm coming to a cinema in your area, then to help get the word out, help get bums on seats, help get people to come along, drag people along, bribe them with dinner beforehand or something to get people to actually watch it. And hopefully we can jar enough people and bring back enough memories for enough people that we can really see a result here in Victoria. The good news is that the swing in Victoria was more substantial than any other state. So there is evidence that anger is there. People are saying, "Oh, but it was a swing away from the Liberal Party." Well, it was a swing away from the major parties, both of them. And yes, it was a swing away from the Liberal Party at a federal level because they were the ones that stuffed us up at a federal level. But I think we're going to see a swing away from Labor at a state level. I think many Victorians are very well aware of the damage that was done by Daniel Andrews, but we just need to make sure it's fresh and make sure that when they walk into that polling booth, they don't just go in there and do the same thing that they've done all their life, or that their dad did all of his life. We need them to do something different. Exactly, Casey. Don't let them memory hole what they did. Let's make sure they can't get away from it. Did you notice how neither the Liberal nor the Labor parties brought up all the COVID stuff and the lockdowns in the entire campaign? They don't want to talk about it. I promise you, Daniel Andrews and Matthew Guy do not want to be talking about 2020 and 2021 in the approach to the election in November. Let's make sure that they can't get away from that subject. It's foremost, front and foremost of everyone's mind. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am for the amount of support and the amount of love that I get from you guys. It really helps me to keep going. So thank you. I appreciate it. Stick around, and I'll see you at another Slow Chat. And I look forward to your support as we weaponize Battleground Melbourne. Thanks, guys.